Welcome back on board the Starship. I'm talking with Tom Arnott, who has invented the world's most difficult puzzle and has researched ancient religions and mythology, which we're going to come on to in this part and in the next part of the show. So in your dream, when you dreamt this puzzle, you didn't dream numbers on the sides, did you? So can you tell us?
Well, in the dream, it was some kind of, there were symbols. But as I said earlier, the dream was so lucid, I remembered about 6 of the symbols. And I have a picture of them.
Yeah.
And I made drawings of them, and I've kind of enhanced these a little bit.
We'll put that up on the screen.
I'll show you those.
All right. So they look almost like binary codes to me. This is the first time I've seen them.
Well, that's what I thought.
Prior to the interview. But have you had those analysed by anyone, like cryptographer or anything like that?
No.
So you don't, you know, I mean, I interviewed a guy called John Searle the other week, Professor John Searle, who has invented this supposed over-unity energy device, and his information as a child came in a dream. You know, so you're not the only person to have claimed to have devised sophisticated devices given to you via a dream.
Well, I have a theory about that
You have
too.
a theory about that as well, which we're going to go into. Now then, so how did you've invented this puzzle? How did that then lead you to write the book?
Well, what I did was, ever since a child, as I said earlier, I've been interested in astrophysics, multi-dimensions, you know, string theory, anything of that ilk, as well as history. And then growing up, you know, things I suppose most thinking people dwell on from time to time is, you know, why do we get upset when a loved one dies? And is there a life after death? And, you know, what about these people that claim to be clairaudient or, you know, telepathic? And there's just a lot of evidence that can support it depending upon the interpretation. So I've always been interested in that kind of thing. So I started researching this. I've never found any symbols like that. But what I did notice was, if you look at the symbols, they kind of look like 9 dots. And some are joined and some aren't.
Right.
So then I looked into this number 9. I thought, oh, well, there's 9 cubes on a layer.
Yes.
There's 27 in all. And then I started to read a little bit about numerology, which is over 3,000 years old. I don't know if you know much about
I'm not
numerology.
massively up on numerology,
But I found quite by accident that everyone has a life number. And that everyone has a base number. And all humans' base number is the same, and it happens to be the number 9. And around about the same time, I was basically, why do things come to you in a dream? Now, this is where call them angels, extraterrestrials, or what have you. But I believe that you can be communicated with on a subconscious level, telepathically, by an outside entity, if you like.
Non-physical.
But it's perceived as a dream.
Right.
You can be given messages or inspiration. You know, the muses. Incidentally, there was 9 muses in Greek mythology. Man invented these muses to try and explain how he was getting inspiration for paintings or for music or for puzzles or what have you. So I started looking into it, and as I was reading, you know, I found, how many types of angel are there? 9. And then I got fascinated with this number 9, because the letters, as I say...
Yes, they're in a matrix of 9 by... 3 by 3, aren't they? Yeah.
And I've actually written a small book all about the number 9 in art, in history, in religion, in politics, and it's pretty relevant stuff, if you like. And so that's basically what led us into the whole thing. The more I researched, the more I found, and it was kind of like, if you imagine a picture of the world, of life, the truth, but it's a jigsaw.
Yes.
And there's so many pieces there, but there's so many missing. I developed the theory that mankind, for his own needs, has interpreted these missing pieces to suit his own ends.
Right.
But when you look at the whole thing objectively and look at it logically, you can see that we've made so many mistakes in the past, and you can make an educated guess as to where the things are, the way things should be, and the way things are going to be.
Yes. And some of the pieces that we've interpreted incorrectly, you believe, are to do with our interpretations of what the religious books were trying to say. The
Yeah.
messages that probably originated a lot longer before they were written.
Yeah. I mean, what I did was I looked at the Holy Bible, you know, the story of Genesis right through to Revelations.
Yes.
I read bits of the Quran, the
Yes.
Torah, to try and get a grasp. And what occurred to me was that all had parts of it in common.
Yes.
For instance, that we were created by a greater power in his own image. I
Yes.
believe that, but not in the strictest sense that the Bible says it. And we could go on to that in
Yes.
another time. But they all had a lot of commonalities. However, they all had certain disagreements. And it seems that the dogma or the religious teachings were twisted to suit human frailties for whatever reason.
Yes.
Which is wrong, because it's, to my mind, and I call it the unholy trinity, what's ended up is religion, as well as politics and culture, serve only to segregate man, one each from each other,
Yes.
to divide.
Yes.
And the only reason you divide things is so you can conquer or control them. And the more I read, for instance, the more things start to come together. Again, this number 9 ties in. I don't know why it's relevant, but I think it was Muhammad, the prophet of Allah. He had several wives before he became the prophet.
Yes.
And his youngest wife was 9-year-old. Now, not that that's relevant, but this number 9 keeps cropping up all over the place.
So where does the base number originate from, if every human being has a base number? Who
Well,
invented that? Or is this way back?
This is numerology. It's between 3,000 and 4,000 years old, and some say that it's based on your birth name. Some say that it's based on your birth date.
Right.
And you sum them all up. Whatever number it comes to, it sums down to a number, which is your life number. And it
Yes.
in my case, it's 4, funnily enough.
Yes.
And then whenever you read about numerology, it dictates the character of your probable history and your possible future based on this number 4, or you could be number 6, or
Yes.
you know. But everyone has a base number, and I forget how it's actually calculated, but anyone can look it up on the internet, where you take your life number and you do a little sum with it, and you come up with the base number, and everybody's base number is the same. It's 9,
Yes.
funnily enough. And then it gets into, well, I've called it the rhythm of life. I don't like to, because it reminds us of the song by Elton John. But the rhythm of life, numerology dictates that everyone has a rhythm. You have ups and downs in your life. You have good times,
Like
you
a
have bad
biorhythm.
times. Like a biorhythm.
Right.
And that these peaks and troughs, the greater the peak, the greater the trough. So the greater the misery you've suffered, the greater your high. I mean, you can't
Yes.
you don't know a black's black unless you have a
Yes.
white to compare it to. And that the average time lapse between these peaks, according to numerology, is, funnily enough, 9 years.
Mm-hmm.
So then I researched a bit further. Tolkien, he wrote The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings 9 years apart. It's like you
Yes.
got inspiration every 9 years.
Yes.
And if you look throughout other art history and things like that, that seems to be true of most people.
I'm with you with regards the fact that they haven't interpreted the information correctly from these ancient texts.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also with you in the fact that there's possibly something very significant about the number 9. But where I maybe differ is in that, you know, because of your name you can work out a number. I'm not really sold on that idea. Or your date of birth, adding up when you start adding up numbers in years, I don't think it becomes irrelevant for me.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I mean, you know, if there's one thing I love above everything else, it's the honesty and the purity of mathematics and physics. And because I think that way, I really have a hard time with this numerology thing. I wouldn't say I believed in it or I followed it any more than a horoscope. What I'm saying is that it's more than coincidence that it just happens to be number 9
Right.
that crops up there. It's just one example, if you like.
Now, if we can look at some quotes that I've pulled out here from the Bible, Tom. I mean, we've got the Book of Enoch, which was a book that was, well, people argue whether it's part of the Bible. I think it was discovered in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the Catholic Church, sort of banned it from their religion because it said certain things that they weren't happy with, what have you. But in other parts of the Bible, we've got in Genesis, and it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, and they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. So what it's speaking about is that the angels come down and take wives of men and create the Nephilim. Mm-hmm. Now the Nephilim in these ancient texts are, well, they were like super beings. Yeah. You care to tell us about the Nephilim, Tom?
Well, right. Now, first of all, in Enoch, where it says the sons of God mated with the daughters of man, there's another story, and they're all pretty similar. Mm-hmm. And I think it's the Torah, whereby God wanted to test man's iniquity, so he sent 2 angels down to see if they would fare any better on earth, mm-hmm. Harut and Marut. Mm-hmm. They didn't. They found a woman attractive, and they had intercourse with her.
Yes.
And a witness to that fact, they murdered the witness. Mm-hmm. So they had to put their hands up and said that on earth, on the earthly plane, they were no better than man.
Yes.
However, because of that act, God consigned them to roam the earth forever. Some versions say they were consigned to hang upside down in a Babylonian well forever.
Known as watchers. Some people
the
call
watchers,
them. Yeah.
or the Gregori. But the fact is that all of these ancient writings, and including the Bible, there is some interaction between a greater power and those people that roamed the earth at that time. And I use the word people loosely because I think they were little more than Neanderthals, who aren't our descendants, by the way. They're just cousins.
Yes.
There wasn't room for both of us. So basically the conclusions I've drawn from that are pretty logical, mm-hmm. that no person alive today is indigenous to this earth. Yeah. We are, at the very least, hybrids of a greater power. We are gods in the making, if you like.
Yes. This ties in with Sitchin's work, where he has translated ancient Sumerian texts which talk of the Anunnaki, who created mankind around about 250,000 years ago as a slave race.
Yeah.
And perhaps this is what the Bible and these other texts are speaking about when they say that man was created in God's image.
Yeah.
That we were like God, but not as perhaps didn't have the abilities. Was a lesser being. And another point which is pointed out in this book, The Gods of Eden by William Bramley, which speaks a lot of the information is in this book. What you're talking about, mm-hmm. is that prior to about 1300, 1400 BC, nobody ever used the word God. It was gods.
Yeah.
In other words, a race.
Yeah.
This and it was changed around about that time to, I think they call it a monotheism, uh-huh. where people had to look up to one God.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I always like to look at is cargo cults, where in the 15th, 16th century, the Westerners came with guns onto islands of people who'd never seen a gun before, mm-hmm. and those tribes people end up building monuments of a gun or a cannon, and they think it's a god, mm-hmm. so they start worshipping it.
Of course.
And this is possibly what the later Egyptians were doing, mm-hmm. worshipping entities that actually existed.
That were greater than themselves.
Yes.
But when you talk about the plural, the being more than one God,
yeah.
I couldn't get the word out there. Even if you think about it, and it's quite funny, even God himself admits that. Apparently when he gave the tablets to Moses, one of the first commandments was, thou shalt not worship any other God before me. So he's kind of saying there are other gods. You just
yes.
can't worship them.
Yes.
You know, it's...
And that's part of the divide and conquer thing, because in the Gods of Eden, William Bramley, he makes a very good case for the fact that since the beginning of man, there has been kind of a guiding finger from the outside, making sure that man is divided by creating different languages, keeping people apart so that they will then war with each other, creating wars, creating famines, and creating diseases. He believes that a lot of the plagues of the Middle Ages were caused by an outside source deliberately. He believes that the Crusades were caused deliberately, that both world wars were caused deliberately from an outside source. And that brings us on to characters like the Count de Saint-Germain. Can you tell us about this guy, Tom? Because he's a very intriguing character.
Basically, just to bring a bit of background into it, so as I said before, we are part God, if you like. When we were manipulated as a race so many years ago, and we do obviously have godlike qualities, which explains. Now, some of us haven't know it, some of us don't know it, some of us are good at it, etc. Which explains.
But when you say God, you're not meaning the omnipresent God that created the universe.
No.
You don't mean that, do you?
No, I mean the greater power
that possibly created man a few 100,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Perhaps an extraterrestrial race.
I'll say it's certainly an extraterrestrial race, without a doubt.
Right.
To my mind, not some omnipotent being with a long beard. It was a higher intelligence, for want of a better word, extraterrestrial, not of the earth. And so some of us exhibit our powers through, clairaudience or clairvoyance, or and most of us have suffered déjà vu, or which is a form of either creating the future or seeing the future. And some of us have more control over these powers, or they know that they have them, so they exercise them, and some of us don't.
Yes.
The powers that be keep us segregated and separated and down, so that we don't realize that power for their own ends. Now, every now and again, for instance, the first of the Nephilim was said to be giants. I mean, Goliath was said to be a giant, a Nephilim. But obviously, as he's mated with daughters of man, we're not so tall anymore.
And we have many references in the Bible to people living to be well over 100 years, 200 years.
Methuselah, Moses was supposed to be 400 years plus. Now, at first, I thought that was time dilation, that they may have took him away from Earth, travelled near to the speed of light when time slows down, and then brought him back 400 years later. Hence, he's 400-year-old. But now, when you think about it, I read in the papers the other day that now that they've mapped the human genome, they've identified the aging gene, that within 10 years they'll be able to give you a pill that will stop your aging and you can live for as long as you like. Now, if you think about it, all of our religions, especially Christianity, promise life everlasting, immortality. They were hinting that this is possible for us once we get our act together and settle ourselves down. But the Comte de Saint-Germain, he's a historical figure, and a lot of things have been documented about him. And interestingly enough, when you put it all together, these acts that were attributable to him spread over a period of about 300 years.
Yeah, I've got just some information on him here, that he was variously described as a courtier, adventurer, charlatan, inventor, alchemist, pianist, violinist, and amateur composer. So he had all of these skills. He was multi-skilled, and he was the best conversationalist, and he never was ever seen eating.
No, he was never seen eating in public.
And there are references to him being seen in 1919, 1930, and he's supposed to have born in like round about 1700. Yeah. So that would make him over 200 years old if the stories are true.
If you read deeper into it, I mean, he was
But he was a key figure in international politics at that time. He was an agent of King Louis XV, I think, and was involved in various secret societies where he was plotting one person against another, divide and conquer again, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Some say he was a Rosicrucian, some say Illuminati, but there's documented he was a friend of Casanova, he was a friend of Tchaikovsky, Catherine the Great, Peter, the Tsar.
Some people say that he actually saw Jesus Christ. Is that another?
Well, he actually said, and he quoted times that he was on friendly terms with Jesus Christ.
Right. I mean, that's a bit hard to believe, isn't it?
Well, why? I mean, first of all, I believe that Jesus Christ existed. He was a member of the Nazarene Church, but I think his brother James the Just was the militant one, and it was only years later. Well, digress anyway.
Well, we're going to go for another short break now, Tom,
Sure.
and we will come on to your book in part 3. So don't go away.